recognizing that fire is extremely stressful. And when we see impacts like we are seeing in West Kelowna, in the Shuswap, in the Fraser Canyon, there's a lot of stress and anxiety about what happened and what are we doing now. And I appreciate these questions, and rest assured we are doing everything we can to try to provide BC with as much information that we have on, one, what happened, and secondly, what we're doing now. I want to address the first part, or the first question here, which is around prioritizing resources for the McDougall fire, and only the McDougall fire. Let me be very clear. We are not only prioritizing the McDougall fire in West Kelowna and Kelowna. We have multiple priority fires across the province, particularly centered in the southern portion of the province, including but not limited to the Adams Lake Complex, Kookapi Creek wildfire, the Bender Complex, which is in and around Lillooet-Lytton, as well as the fires that is in the Ashnola and a couple in the southeast. For clarity, we have 164 people assigned to the McDougall Creek wildfire in Kelowna and West Kelowna. There are 385 people assigned to the Adams Lake Complex. There's over 130 people assigned to Kookapi Creek, and there's over 180 resources assigned to the Bender Complex in the Fraser Canyon. We evaluate daily ground operations and make decisions on moving resources based on where the most potential and significant impact of the fires will be to life and property. That will continue for the rest of the fire season, and we will see numbers go up and down based on what those potential impacts could be. The resources that Minister Ralston referenced coming into BC will be assigned largely to the fires within the Kamloops Fire Centre and the Fraser Canyon, and we will see those numbers of resources tick up from where they are today. The second piece I want to discuss is around an operational tactic that we refer to in wildfire as planned ignitions. Planned ignitions, for clarity and in fairly simple terms, is where we will build and or utilize an existing control line, something that is unflammable, a power line where we might use heavy equipment to get down to mineral soil, a lake, a highway, or any variation of that. That was what we would call a control line. We build it in front of the head of the fire, the main body of the fire, and then we conduct a planned ignition utilizing weather experts, fire experts, and operational experts based on what weather is currently on site and what weather is coming. The goal of a planned ignition is to work from the control line to the main body of the fire and remove all fuel by burning it. The main body of the fire generally has wind that draws into it. And so when we light off of the control line, it pulls the fire back into itself, thus eliminating fuels between the main body of the fire and anything past that control line. I want to specifically talk about the Adams Lake, Lower East Adams fire. We did conduct a planned ignition on that fire last Thursday. We did it cautiously. We did it knowing that there was a cold front coming. As BC is aware, we discussed the cold front coming on Wednesday and Thursday. We knew the winds were coming. As those winds were approaching, going through the Caribou Fire Centre, there was a continuous line of fuel between the main body of the fire and all of the communities along the North Shuswap. We did our planned ignition under the conditions in which we planned for, and it was largely successful. I want to be perfectly clear, that planned ignition saved hundreds of homes and properties along the North Shuswap. Unfortunately, with the wind that we knew was forecast and that was coming, that fire went above the control line that we burned off from and then swept back into the communities in the North Shuswap. We were still successful in protecting some of those properties along the North Shuswap in the hundreds. Unfortunately, we've also now seen the devastation the main body of that fire had in areas like Scotch Creek, Solista, and others. And our hearts go out to those individuals who have seen the devastating impacts of that fire making its push. Our planned ignition is used quite frequently in BC. It is also used across the globe. When conditions are as dry as they are in a year like this in BC, traditional firefighting tactics like water bombers and ground operations will not be successful. Eliminating the fuel is, in a lot of cases, the best way to try to protect any infrastructure and values ahead of the front of a fire. And when we know that there's 40 to 50 kilometer sustained winds coming, We knew that we had to eliminate that fuel. And again, I would like to stress, it was largely successful and it protected hundreds of properties in the Shuswap area. I also would like to just make one point of clarity that it was not our planned ignition that allowed the two fires in the Adams Lake area to merge. It was actually the cold front winds that pushed the fires together and merging them towards Highway 1, which ultimately ultimately led to the closure of Highway 1. So I just want to thank everyone for hearing me out on those two pieces, and now I'll go into a more thorough operational update. So as we sit today, we do still see some extreme fire behavior being observed throughout the province. Right now, we have not seen extreme fire behavior observed within the McDougall complex, and we have seen actually a drop in fire behavior on the Adams Lake complex as well. Where we continue to see aggressive fire behavior is in the Fraser Canyon, and that's due to the sustained winds of the valley and the valley orientation north to south in that valley. Continue to see a large response presence in that valley, but with it, we're still seeing some aggressive fire behavior. Starting in the Adams Lake complex, again, just for clarity, the dots are somewhat of the growth over the last 72 hours. Anything that's more colored in red was the perimeter of the fire pre-last Thursday's cold front passage. So you can see how much this fire has moved over the course of the last couple of days, mostly on Thursday and Friday last week. You can see that it has crossed Highway 1 and is just sitting in between Chase and Sorrento on that side, as well as you can see where some of the fire growth has been to the north and northeast towards the Shuswap. We are fortunate, and I'm happy to report that with the change in weather conditions, we are able to get heavy equipment out on the ground. We've had the ability to get our ground resources back on the ground. Challenging for us on this fire today and likely tomorrow is going to be smoke impacts. Anyone who lives in the interior in Kamloops knows that we have a heavy blanket of smoke right now, and visibility and Transport Canada regulations. It's going to be touch and go how much we can fly in the next 12 hours, hoping that with a little bit of precipitation potentially coming, that we may see that smoke clear, and it'll allow us to get our aviation fleet back in the air. Moving down to what we're now calling the Grouse Complex, which is West Kelowna, and Lake Country. Very successful operational day on these fires yesterday. As you have likely seen, we were able to recommend making some orders back into alerts. We've also had a lot of success with our ground operations, pushing heavy equipment around these fires and trying to ensure that we can contain them. So that no matter what the weather brings in the coming days, that we have the ability to operate off of our containment lines and try to keep these fires in their box and not see any more impacts to communities and infrastructure. On this fire in particular, as well as in the Adams complex, it would be amiss if I didn't thank municipal fire departments, local governments, First Nation governments for really stepping up and partnering with BC Wildfire Service. We cannot do this alone. We need that partnership. We really all have to show up to try to get people home and do it in a safe way. The Bender complex, which I spoke about in the Fraser Canyon, where we are still seeing quite significant fire behavior. On the left is the Downton fire. That fire has seen a bit more growth and has some challenging SPS in Goldbridge, Gun Lake, as well as now starting to see needing additional resources, structure protection resources for the communities up and down the Fraser Canyon, just to be safe, with fires to the north being the Bender complex and fires to the south being Kukipi Creek. Quickly just touch on the Crater Creek fire down by Lower Similkameen Indian Band and Karamias. Some good news on this fire as well. While the fire did push into the United States, we have a strong partnership with the United States. We're working together on that end of the fire, as well as where the fire is situated currently above Karamias and LSIB. We had a fire there 3 years ago, quite a substantial fire. And so the main body of the Crater Creek fire is not able to continue to burn towards the Highway 3. So some successful tactics going on this fire. and continue to see a little bit of growth, but nothing significant. Upper Park Real Creek fire, just outside of, going back. So this fire is roughly 1,100 hectares. We did see a little bit of growth in the last 48 hours, nothing substantial, and we are having good success on the ground on this fire with heavy equipment, ground resources, and yesterday we were able to fly aviation assets on it. So roughly 1,100 hectares. We're feeling fairly confident with our operation on this fire. And again, thanks to the strong partnerships that we have in the area. Cookiepe Creek fire in the Fraser Canyon. Obviously this fire, it was last Friday that it made a significant push across the river and across Highway 1. We are still seeing the challenges of the valley orientation coming out of the Nahatlatch, which runs east to west into the Fraser Canyon that runs north to south. And so you can see this fire has made some push to the north towards Kanaka Bar. We haven't seen a lot of growth to the south, and we have seen some growth over to the east. We do have some operable ground, although it's very steep in this valley. We do have some operable ground to the north and to the south, a little bit more challenging as it gets into the steep draw canyons across Highway 1. But we are making a plan and working with the local communities to ensure that that plan works for everyone in that valley. Just quickly touch on resourcing. As discussed, we have roughly 3,500 people engaged in fire response across the province today. We do have 100 Mexican firefighters arriving on Tuesday, 200 South Africans at the end of the week, and additional single resources. Continue to see a large rotary wing aviation fleet with 128 helicopters, 35 air tankers, and we are starting to see record-breaking numbers in terms of BC Wildfire Service, in terms of structure protection resources, with 288 out in the field. Again, thanking municipal fire departments for their support of this effort in a very challenging fire season. And we have flown just about 800 air tanker missions in 2023. In 2021, which was also a very challenging fire year, for the entire season, we flew 800. So we are likely to break that record here today, as long as the smoke lifts and we're able to fly.